Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Good morning, everybody. I seem to be cranking out episodes at a more rapid rate, which makes me happy to get more content out there. And I made a deal with myself. Like, I don't do content. If I don't have something to say, I don't do content. I don't make myself do content. But I am always thinking a lot about stuff. And so I'm going to do an episode today that is a little bit touchy. Anything that has to do with gender stereotypes or generalizations is, you have to be super careful with that stuff, not because you're worried about how people will respond, but because generalizations are full of crap a lot, right? They're full of crap a lot. And at the level of the individual, they tend to fall apart. But I am going to address something that I was thinking about this morning, and I'm going to give you a vocabulary word. The word is specious, as in a specious argument, which means having the ring of truth or plausibility, but is actually fallacious, deceptively appealing, presenting a pleasing appearance, pleasing in form or look. So the arguments that I'm going to make are specious in the sense that they are attractive depending on the gender to which you belong. But the first one is going to be more obviously stupid. So maybe it's not specious, maybe it's just a silly argument. But I'm going to make it and then equate it to an argument that gets made on the other side. So I'm going to make up an argument here. And I'm going to say, let's say if you randomly took 500 men and you randomly took 500 women, generally nobody's going to be surprised if the men can lift more, can run faster, are more explosive, are quicker, or more capable of doing violence. If you put them in a room and said, okay, everybody fight, like 9 times out of 10, the men are going to win. Like, nobody, men or women, argue about this. And there are definitely lots and lots of badass warrior women in front of whom I wouldn't have a chance, or like whatever. So let's not get into the exception bullshit. I'm not making some across the board statement that women are not capable of incredible athletics, et cetera, et cetera. But there is a reason that there's athletics and there's women's athletics, right? It's because biologically there's a difference there. Okay, so I'm going to make a specious argument. Maybe it's not even specious. Maybe it's just a silly argument. And then I'm going to transfer it to another gender argument that people make. Because men generally, because of genetic inheritance, testosterone, blah, blah, tend to be quicker, stronger, more powerful, more athletic. Just there's more power and dynamism in the athleticism. What if I made the statement that men are physically, when it comes to physical space and in relationship to the body, are wiser and have more athletic intelligence than women? Okay, when I say that, there might be men out there that are like, yeah, hell yeah, blah, blah. But I think anybody who's reasonable and level-headed knows that's stupid. That's so silly, right? Because you could also easily make the argument that because men are capable of more intensity, more speed, more explosiveness, more violence, more dramatic, we're capable of sustaining dramatic, intense, and explosive physical activity, to argue that somehow makes us physically wiser or wiser about our biology or about physical things is a pretty stupid argument, right? Because on the other side of this, you have women who are often highly attuned to their own bodies, their own biology. And part of this is built in, having to deal with a monthly cycle that's related to propagating the species, being capable of bearing children, the very fact that they may not be distracted by the explosiveness and the strength and the power, blah, blah, may make them far wiser physically, right? So maybe there's a reason that wives are the ones who are like, hey, like, you need to go to the doctor. Like, I've seen you sick, but this is something else. Like, you need to go. And the guy goes and he's like, shit, I got colon cancer. Like, well, right? So the argument that because men are more explosive, more capable of sustaining more violent, high impact physicality, to take that and to assume that men have greater wisdom, insight, intelligence around physicality and biology and the use of the body and the inhabiting of the body is a dumb argument. It's just silly. That's a silly argument, right? And I think anybody, again, maybe there are some men out there that when I said it are like, hell yeah, like maybe because it feels good. But that's the part that's specious, because it kind of feels good. It has attractiveness to it. If you're male and you have some anger or frustration with women, that if you're in that gender war bullshit, maybe that argument makes you feel good. But I think most level-headed people, and I think almost for sure women, and I think most men understand that's a silly ass argument. That men are more explosive, capable of sustaining high impact and explosive activity, maybe longer than women, like whatever, doesn't make men more insightful and wiser in athletic or physical domains or biological domains than women. It doesn't. And it's not unreasonable to make an argument that women, exactly because they can't be they're not as distracted by the explosiveness, intensity, and speed that men are capable of, would be exactly why they may be more attuned, that the biological processes they go through are much more linked to much longer term biological processes, and that require maybe a deeper insight and a deeper presence, a more of a humility and acceptance of the biological process that may make them wiser, that may result in them being able to, right, say like, hey, you need to go to the doctor, or like, you need to get more sleep. You can't just keep doing this. Okay, so I'm still talking in generalizations, which are generally fairly full of crap, but I'm using it to illustrate something. Okay, so I made that argument, which I'm saying is probably a specious argument. No one's ever made that. I've never heard that argument before, so I'm not saying that someone said that, but I made it up to illustrate something. Something that I hear a lot in the culture today, at least American culture, and especially in the industries that I've worked in, education, psychology, these are heavily dominated. And I can tell you, as a male therapist, when you do case consultations, blah, blah, let's say your client is a young woman or something, and you're consulting and blah, blah, blah. Sometimes there's this little hint of a question of like, well, do you have rapport with this person? There's this idea in the back of women's head that there may be a lack of emotional insight and emotional subtlety that allows you access to a healthy dynamic. And in the culture in general, there's this idea that women are emotionally more intelligent than men. And I'm telling you right now, as a therapist, I'm telling you this is a crock of shit. Women have no ownership or access to emotional intelligence any more than men have access to physical intelligence. And I'll tell you why, right? And I'm not saying this to beat up women. Women are human beings. They're human beings. And they grow up like the rest of us. And if they grow up in a family that's emotionally dull with tons of denial and blah, blah, that woman grows up separated from her emotions and deeply in denial and sometimes very narcissistic and clueless. And like, it's just humans, guys. It's just humans. Don't get caught up in the gender wars of this, these people. Oh. And I'm addressing this just because there's such a strong signal out there in the culture that women are more emotionally intelligent than men. And they're just not. They're not. They're just not. They're not less. Right? I'm not knocking women, but they're just not. It's a myth. It's a fucking myth. And so now I'll tell you why I made the other argument, where I made the specious argument that because men have this biological inheritance through testosterone and, whatever, that there's more explosiveness, capability of sustaining near violent sort of intensity and impact and, speed and blah, 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 that women don't have access to often. And there are many exceptions, again, right? That somehow makes men physically or biologically more intelligent. It doesn't. That's a dumb argument, right? The fact that they're capable of creating more impact, that men are capable of creating more impact, or that sometimes we may fear men because of their ability to be explosive and fast and blah, 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 does not in any way, shape, or form make them the wisdom in that space. In fact, that often leads them to be less wise in that space, right? Like, we can all agree on that men's propensity to go to war is a big fucking problem with men dominating leadership across the globe for millennia. It's a big fucking problem. It's a big problem. Men's propensity to go to war, which comes directly out of that same biological inheritance. And we're becoming wise enough to know that that's not fucking wise. Okay? So let's bring the argument over here to this idea that has great traction in the culture, that women are more emotionally intelligent. This is not a studied opinion, right? I'm a therapist, but that doesn't lend any authority to this. This is just from me observing. So when I say this, I don't know whether there's a biological inheritance or whether we just socialize women this way or blah, blah, blah. But what I think is true is that women are capable of sustaining a far greater emotional intensity and greater emotional drama, much more dramatic emotional expression than men are capable of or want to. And everyone in the culture equates this to emotionality and to emotional intelligence and a willingness to be vulnerable. And it's the biggest crock of shit on the face of the planet. Being emotionally intense and dramatic is not fucking vulnerability. It is, in fact, emotional narcissism and how women manipulate people and how women manipulate men. That's not emotionally intelligent. Men being unwilling to emotionally express does not make them less emotionally intelligent. It's often because they have emotional intelligence that they're not willing to express or open up and be vulnerable in a world full of emotional narcissists. We're going to be super intense. And, there are women who want, for example, the men in their life to be more emotionally vulnerable and blah, blah. And that's a real thing. And men are socialized not to be emotionally expressive. So I'm not denigrating those women. But for every one of those women is a woman who says that she wants her husband to be more emotionally vulnerable only because she wants access in order to manipulate him. And because women have been raised and socialized to believe that they have a right to men's emotional, psychological bodies. And it is for this reason that men are particularly Let me make this go away, guys. It's often for this reason that men are particularly not comfortable, right? For as many conversations as I have with couples in which the woman genuinely has married a man who's sort of emotionally shut down and, blah, 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 as many conversations as that happens where that is legit, and that happens, that's real, right? There are men who have socialized themselves, or they're just by their personality are sort of emotionally dull and lack expression, lack insight into their own emotional experiences. About, like, that's a real thing. But again, for every one of those things, there's also a woman demanding that a man be more emotionally vulnerable because she's manipulative. And the moment she gets access to his emotions, she's she's infantilizing him, controlling him, using her access to criticize, to psychologize, to convince him that he's this and he's that and he needs to do the blah blah. And all it is narcissism and manipulation, using this emotional intensity that overwhelms this person. Okay, so I could sit here and give you a bunch of different scenarios about how and why this happens. But what I'm telling you is, across the culture, it's probably true either through socialization, or maybe there's some biological propensity that women are capable of emotional intensity and emotional violence, and they're capable of sustaining that the way men are capable of sustaining physical violence for far longer than most women are capable or would ever want to. Women are capable of, seem to be capable of sustaining intense emotional expression for much longer. And all that does is sort of often makes them the narcissistic bullies of the emotional psychological world, the way men are the bullies of the physical world, due to their biological inheritance. If you take a man who's not quite bright and not very perceptive, and you put him out in the world where he has to compete, well, he's just going to turn to physical violence or the threat of physical violence to get his way because he's an idiot. Right? And that's what's available to him. But that's what you have on women's side, is there may be this propensity or this ability to be emotionally intense, and this ability to sustain it in a way that men either don't want to, right? Like, men often out of wisdom are like, why? Why would anybody want to do that? Like, we don't want to do that. We're not interested in living a life of emotional drama and intensity and misery and psychological chaos, right? But because women are socialized either to have that as a right to act in that way, or maybe there's a biological propensity. Again, I'm not the expert. What you have is a significant number of women who are narcissistic, who are not emotionally intelligent or wise, who merely use the idea of women as more expressive and more emotionally intelligent to entitle themselves to be emotionally dramatic, intense, manipulative, super expressive, as long as it serves their needs and as long as they get to use it to overwhelm other people and overwhelm men in their lives and to manipulate and to get what they want. And they're full of shit. And the entire society sits here and signs off on it as women being more emotionally intelligent and emotionally more aware. And it's bullshit. It is as specious as the other argument. Now, it irritates me, maybe partially because I'm a man, but I think if I advocate for myself, it irritates me not just because I share gender, right? Because men do an enormous amount of damage with physicality and have done for millennia. It's enormous amount of damage. And that fucking pisses me, like that irritates me no end. But we've at least begun to talk about it and to go, look, this is a thing. Like, men raping is a problem. Men assaulting, war is like, this is a huge problem. But we've barely begun to talk about this entitlement in which we entitle sociopathic, narcissistic, destructive women because we refuse to consider the possibility that women are not emotionally more intelligent than men, and that many women are using that entitlement to bully. And you could make the argument, it's like, well, when a man is he's like physically punching someone and someone gets their arm broken, it's like, hey man, you have no idea how much damage these women do and how insidious and how dangerous it is, exactly because they're not going to go to jail for that. We hope that at some point, if a guy brutalizes people and he breaks his wife's arm, that at some point he goes to jail. And that hasn't always been true. But there's something there where society starts to respond. But women can just destroy people, destroy their own children for life. And everyone signs off on it as, well, their women are more emotional, they have more access to their emotions, and okay, maybe it went a little bit far, blah, blah, blah. Like, the arguments that get made are just as disgusting as the arguments about, like, oh, he's 21 and maybe he went a little bit far. Yes, technically it's rape. It's fucking disgusting. Shut the fuck up. I don't want to hear that shit. That dude raped somebody. But the same is true over here, right? You have women who feel totally entitled to men's psychology and men's emotions, or anyone, their own daughters, or, whatever. And they're complete sociopaths and bullies who use it and leverage it. And the moment anyone goes, wait a minute, something's going on over there, they're like, oh, woe is me, I'm a victim and I feel so much for, and they're totally full of shit. It's just a sociopath and a narcissist ruining other people to serve their own needs. And they get away with it because there's this whole entitlement. And there's this whole belief that women are emotionally more intelligent than men. Okay? So I'm not going to go on and on and on because I'm not interested in fueling the gender wars. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in beating up on women who are just humans who have suffered at the hands of men's violence for millennia. I'm not interested. I know what that is. But I am interested in all of us just accepting that men are human and women are human, and there isn't any generalization that you can make that isn't full of shit, man. It's all a bunch of shit. You have to take people as individuals. There are large, right? Again, taking large groups, men have a propensity to a capability of physical violence and bullying and blah, 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 right? And women have a propensity towards emotional expression. But neither of those things makes either one more intelligent in that realm. Men's ability to be violent makes them less intelligent in that realm. Women's ability to be emotionally intense and dramatic makes them less intelligent in that realm. Those women who are that. The same as those men who use physical prowess and violence are less intelligent. It is the sign of a lack of intelligence because they have no other tools to use. The same way these women who are sociopathic about emotions and psychology and emotional intensity, they don't have any other tools. So that's what they resort to, right? So putting to bed this idea that emotional expressiveness is vulnerability or emotional intelligence is completely specious. It's bullshit. And the problem is both men and women buy this crap. And it is profoundly untrue. Okay? There are women who are emotionally intelligent. There are men who are emotionally intelligent. It has way more to do with the individual, the choices they make, how they educate themselves, working on their biological inheritance, being aware of who and what they are, and caring about how that plays out and how other people experience it. That's what emotional intelligence comes from. It doesn't come from the fact that you can be dramatic or intense or you can cry about something that you read in the news. That's not fucking emotional intelligence. I'm not saying there's something wrong with it. I'm soft-hearted. I cry over shit. Sometimes I see stuff in TV shows and it kind of chokes me up and makes me cry. That's not emotional intelligence. That's just emotional expressiveness. Like some people are fast sprinters and some people are easy crier. Like, so that's not emotional intelligence. So I'm calling bullshit on that thing. And it's good. It's good for women. It's good for men to call bullshit on that thing. Emotional expressiveness does not make you more emotionally intelligent. It often makes you less emotionally intelligent. All right. Enough said. Everybody, let's just be humans. We love our women. They're human. We love our men. They're human. We love wherever you fall. If you don't exactly fall into some gender definition, you're a human. We love you. That's it. Man, shut the fuck up with all this gender wars crap. But anyway, I'm putting that one to bed. It's put to bed. I don't care what you think. We put her to bed. All right, you guys. I love you. Have a great day. Take care.
Just for today, everything's okay. Everything's okay.